It's an act of blind faith, isn't it? So you open a tap, you fill the glass, and then you take a sip. I didn't, because I've just been told what might be in it. It's estimated a staggering 37% of South Africa's apparently clean, drinkable water is being lost through leaking pipes, dripping taps, and that's only what's being reported. For years now, Dr. Anthony Turton, who's a water expert, he's a professor at the University of the Free State Centre for Environmental Management, has been working on the concept of water as an emerging business risk. This is the Moneymakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield, and tonight we look at ways that South African business can help avert an impending water problem, which ultimately will affect bottom lines absolutely everywhere. Is water a business risk?
Absolutely. If you can measure it, you can manage it. And if you don't know about it and you can't measure it, then it comes up and sneaks up and gives you a surprise.
Now, I remember a copy of Finweek magazine from about 6 years ago, probably, with the words Haka, Hiaka, the letters Haka, which in English, HKGK, means here comes big trouble. And it's all about the coming water crisis. That was all about acid mine drainage, and it was about wastage of clean water. Those are fundamental issues in our water supply system.
Yeah, the question of is it a crisis, are we in a crisis? Well, crisis is a word that has got certain values and certain meanings to it. I believe it's a slow onset disaster. So the slow onset disaster differs from a crisis in the sense that we know what the outcome is going to be if we do nothing. So if we intervene in the meantime, we've got time to intervene, we can make a difference.
But we've known for the last 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 years that we've got a slow onset disaster coming. How much action has been taken in the decade that we've known that we've got a slow onset disaster looming?
We've known since the 1970s. There was a commission of inquiry into water matters that absolutely that predicted in the early part of the 21st century the following is going to happen unless we do things about it. So we've known about it for a long time. These things tend to get fairly politicized, and they tend to get become boring and mundane, and most people just take them for granted, and that's the issue, you see. So because we've taken them for granted for so long, we've forgotten about what has to be done about it. So what I've been trying to do is just really raise this issue as a boardroom level issue. If you can understand it, you can manage it. Business is about managing risk. Once you can quantify the risk and deal with the risk, it's actually no longer a problem. In fact, it can very often become an opportunity.
Okay, so give me a sense of what's happening in Joburg, for example. That's where most business is situated. We've got the Vaal Dam, we've got the Lesotho Highlands Water Scheme, we've got runoff that goes into the Vaal River, that goes into the dam, or does the dam go into the river? I forget. Okay. Ultimately, there's runoff, there are broken sewerage systems, there's acid mine drainage, there's a whole bunch of issues that affect the quality of what ends up in the glass.
Absolutely. So it's a long value chain, and in every one of those links of the chain, something can go wrong, or more importantly, an exchange of information needs to take place at that point. The chain is broken down. You know that if you've got a long, complex chain, the chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So let's understand where we are in Johannesburg. Johannesburg is the biggest city in the world that is not on a river, a lake, or a waterfront.
Right.
So we're a very sophisticated, complex economy here that's based 100% on pumping water uphill and flushing it down the other side out of our toilets.
I mean, it's actually a remarkable achievement.
Absolutely.
That we even get water to Joburg in the first place.
Now, the water we get is generally very good quality. So, for example, water coming from the Lesotho Highlands, you can bottle it and make money out of it and sell it at that high value. Water coming out of the Tugela River Basin is pumped up the Drakensberg Mountain. Guess what? Using surplus energy from Eskom. Okay, so that's the idea being that when they need the surge, the spike, they can let it flow down the other side, and they can recover 2/3 of the energy that they put into it. It's like a big battery that they charge on top of the mountain. Well, that's now under pressure. But more importantly, this all reports into the Vaal Dam, and we now know that the Vaal Dam is increasingly contaminated with microcystin toxin, blue-green algae, as a result of dysfunctional sewage works. It's then abstracted by Rand Water, treated at bulk level, pumped through a network of pipes, large diameter pipes, some of which are 100 years old, pipes that go almost from here to Cape Town and back, and then it gets distributed into this massive network at local municipal level, thousands, tens of thousands of kilometers of pipes, old, new, patched, spaghettis of pipes, and then ultimately it ends up either in the factory or the house, where you do something with it, add value to it. It ends up as effluent, and you flush it down your toilet or put it down the drain, when it then gets transferred into the Limpopo River Basin on the other side of the mountain, and it ends up in Hartbeespoort Dam. So basically, this is how we recycle water in South Africa, and we've reached the limit of what we can do with that technology.
Okay, so our technology is what? Is it 70s technology, 80s technology?
A lot of it is 60s, 70s technology, and an interesting thing that happened in sort of 60s and 70s was the sexual revolution. Birth control medication came out. So subsequent to the 60s and 70s, estrogen has entered widestream use in society. Estrogen passes through the body, partly metabolized. Guess what? We don't have the treatment technologies to remove it from our sewage stream. So let's look at the sewage problem in South Africa. We process...
I'm not thirsty anymore, by the way, yeah.
Okay. We process about 5,200 megalitres of sewage every day. Of that, about 4,200 is returned to a river in a partly treated state. And that ends up in some bulk water treatment system where it is then processed into potable water. So we've got a significant problem with our sewage. And if you compare the sewage flows, 4,200 megalitres, to the acid mine drainage flow, 18 megalitres.
Yeah.
The sewage return flows are about 230 times bigger than your acid mine drainage flow. So that gives you a kind of order of magnitude.
So what do we do? I mean, there's a problem, fine. Yeah. There is a system that functions and works but is under severe strain. Yeah. Do we, build a Mudupi equivalent for water treatment?
No, I think we have to just raise awareness. And I think the important thing is I would like to put out a very strong message today. The current Minister of Water Affairs is the first minister subsequent to Carter Asmal that has initiated internal policy reform program, evidence-based policy reform. So, in other words, instead of just shooting from the hip, there's now an internal process. So, I would like us to support the minister in that regard.
Okay,
let's engage, particularly business, because part of what we're trying to do as well is in the mining sector. We've reached the end of some of certainly the gold mining operations are very mature. Some might not last the next 5 years. So, we need to engage in a new business model because, like it or not, Johannesburg is a city of gold. It's a city with 600 kilotons of uranium tied up in the dumps around Johannesburg. If those companies go bankrupt in the next 5 years, that liability is nationalised. What are we going to do about it?
Extraordinary pressures coming through. A lot of people talk about the concept of water shedding. We've become used to load shedding. People say, oh, the next crisis is water. We're going to have water shedding. Technically, water shedding is actually, as I understand it, a pretty difficult thing to do. We could have a breakdown in the system, but the idea of managing water flow like we manage electricity is actually something of a, kind of call it a pipe dream, because it is.
I think it's impossible, because if you look at load shedding says, right, on the one side we've got the supply of energy, other side there's the demand of energy. So basically demand exceeds supply, so we have to do something. So the country is broken down into blocks, and we shed blocks. And we flip a switch, electrons stop flowing in copper cables, and instantly we balance the demand. Now water is different, because water is a localized thing, complex system, pipes, 2-meter diameter pipes in some places, takes a week to fill the pipes, to get the air out of the pipes.
So if you switched off an area, if you switched off Sandton, for example, for 2 hours to ensure that Randburg got water, the pipes would drain, and you wouldn't be able to fill those pipes for a week.
It could take 10 days to reflood. In fact, we saw that when there was a Rand water pump station breakdown, where parts of Johannesburg for almost 10 days did not have water. So that's one of the reasons why we can't have water shedding. But that's also one of the reasons why companies need to understand that these breakdowns, when they happen, they are catastrophic. That's on the quantity side. On the quality side, that's invisible, you don't see it. That's another issue that needs to be dealt with. But ultimately, there are consequences for this. So we need to think about having a generator on site. That's almost standard practice today. Then we also need to start thinking about having an alternative water supply or water treatment process.
Okay, now, what are the alternatives? Because here we go. You can get a generator. That's easy enough. As long as you've got diesel, you get enough power to function. Water storage. I mean, if you look at how much an average garden, for example, a northern suburbs garden takes, it can easily take 5,000 litres a day of borehole water to sustain an ecosystem of a 1 hectare garden or 1 acre garden or whatever the case might be. For an office complex or for a factory, what kind of water supply solutions do you need to have to keep, I don't know, a steel plant going, for argument's sake?
Well, you see, this is a big question. We don't know. I mean, how long is a piece of string? It depends on what your operation's about. So boards need to understand that they've got to look at the operation. Your smart companies, your big beer producers, etc., your big energy companies, they understand it. Sasol, for example, has got a really good in-house ability. SA Breweries, world class. They understand. Nestle, these sort of people, they understand what's going on with water. It's the sort of medium-sized enterprises or the companies that aren't directly directly involved in water processing. They are the ones that are vulnerable.
A really stupid question, but can't we just sort of go to the root cause, go to the source of the problem, which is at water treatment plants, and fix that?
Well, I think we need to do that, but we need to prioritise that, because at the moment that's very low down on the list of priorities.
National priorities.
Our national priorities. We're not investing the correct money in that type of thing. And even if we made a decision tomorrow to invest in the appropriate technologies, it will take a decade for those investments to start rolling out. So that comes down to the sort of immediate short-term problem. And that immediate short-term problem is an end-of-pipe solution. So whatever your factory is, your business, you're at the end of a pipe, and that you're at the start of a sewage pipe. So at the end of your clean water pipe, you've got to do something there. You either got to create your own sort of on-site storage or processing of the water quality. And then on the sewage return flow side, the whole idea of recycling. And the bottom line is, if we all recycle whatever water we use every day 1.6 times, by 2035, we're going to have full employment, happy, smiling people, okay, and a growing economy. That's what we need to do. 1.6, and the target's by 2035. That's the target.
The point is, there's enough of it. There's enough water. We could make it work.
Yeah.
But it requires a very fundamental shift in the way which we think about it and the way we treat the resource.
The funny thing about water is we treat it like a stock, but it's actually a flux. A stock is something that you start with 100% of, you draw it down, you take natural capital, convert it into financial capital and other capital, and you throw away the discard. Water's not like that, it's a flux. In that glass there, a dinosaur's kidney processed some of that water 60 million years ago. Okay, so in other words, because we can recycle it, it doesn't make sense to flush your toilet with drinking water. So we're moving to a future economy where we're going to have what I call a dual stream reticulation system, where water of different quality at different prices is used for different purposes. And where you can internally recycle, that's what's going to happen. But now if you look, for example, at Sandton, look at where we are now. The building codes don't allow for recycling. So we don't have sort of separation, for example, sewage separation at source. Solid and liquid get separated. If you go to Sweden, for example, they've got these separation at source. So you've got solid waste and liquid waste already. It's a very sophisticated process.
It's a fundamental difference. We have to leave it there, but thank you very much. Cheers to you. What's in there that I can't see? I mean, it looks absolutely perfect. It smells fine. It's slightly chlorine-y, but we're used to that.
This is Rand water, and it's pretty good stuff.
What might be in there?
Well, potentially, I don't want to scare you, but what we have to be increasingly worried about is microcystin. Microcystin levels in the country are out of control, and people need to understand what microcystin is. So please go and Google the word microcystin. Micro.
But if there's estrogen in there.
Yeah, and your endocrine disruptors, because we are moving to a recycling economy, and it's fine, you can recycle when you go to the moon in the space shuttle, they recycle, but they've got technology to remove all bad stuff.
Bottled water only for Springboks, please. Dr. Anthony Turton, water expert, professor at the University of the Free State Centre for Environmental Management. Thank you for watching. There'll be more good advice tomorrow. Brush your teeth before you go to bed. Good night. With the rand as wild and woolly and as volatile as it is it possible to use the past to determine the future? I'm talking about inflation, of course. And is there a problem with the methodology used to determine the rate at which prices go up? Let's put it that way. I mean, I don't know what it cost 5 years ago, but I bet you it's a lot more expensive than it was 5 years ago. This stuff as well. Certainly there was a time when the rand was stronger, and these things, computers, laptops, tablets, all of that sort of stuff, prices were coming down quite dramatically. But the cost of living, the price of going off and buying a bottle of Handy Andy has gone up dramatically. However, Stats SA will tell us that inflation's at under 5%. Hands up those who believe Stats SA. Yep, not many people. We're going to talk to Stats SA. This is the MoneyMakers. I'm Bruce Whitfield. Tonight, we look at the integrity of the inflation numbers. Jannie Rossouw is the head of the Wits School of Economic and Business Sciences. And joining us via Skype is Statistics South Africa's Deputy Director General of Economic Statistics, Joe de Beer. We'll touch base with him in just a moment. Jannie, let's touch base with you first. Do you believe the inflation number below 5%?
I do not. I've done my own back-checking, and I've done research with PPS. People don't believe the inflation, and my own back-checking shows figures higher than what, and rates higher than what is reported by Stats SA.
What is the real inflation rate based on your calculations then?
Based on my calculations, about 8.3% since 2006 on average annually.
Okay, I'll ask you how you get to that in a moment, but I just want to see if Joe de Beer is still with us. Joe de Beer from Stats SA, the real inflation rate, according to Jannie Rossouw, the head of the Wits School of Economic and Business Sciences, is 8.3%, twice what you guys are saying what it is. Your response?
I'll stick by our numbers. Thank you very much, but also good evening to yourself, the Prof, and the listeners. Our last estimates was for 4.6 for the month of August, and we have confidence in the way that we do the calculations, but I'm interested to hear how the Prof did his back-checking.
Okay, tell us, Prof, how do you get a number that's twice the official inflation rate, effectively twice?
I actually did two things. With PPS, I ran a research project, asked people whether they believe past inflation. They do not, and based on that, what they expect of future inflation, they expect inflation to be higher than what it is.
But surveys are surveys, they are not scientific.
Then, in 2006, when I did my PhD, I actually recorded individual prices of items in a shop in Silverton. So I went to the same shop and I recorded the prices of the same items 9 years later. Food, clothing, and what I call household consumables. Now, Stats South Africa will be adding, yes, I didn't look at services, but as it is, the service inflation, incidentally, is higher than the goods inflation. So I focused on about 43% of the goods that the poor household would buy in terms of food and clothing. And I personally checked the prices in 2006. I have them in my PhD, and I personally check them now, and I calculated the rate of increase since 2006, 8.3% per annum.
Joe de Beer, is that research methodology flawed from a Stats SA perspective?
I think it depends on what you want to prove. We must keep in mind that the CPI is a price change measure that should be reflective of the rates of change in prices that the entire population experiences. Not only the population that might be shopping in Silverton, which is a middle-class neighborhood. And for that reason, when Stats SA calculates the CPI, we make sure that the basket of goods covers the expenditure patterns of all the households. And therefore, it is very important if the Prof does his methodology to make sure that the products that he actually priced at the shop in Silverton would be the typical products that everybody buys. Now, I would like to ask a question around the methodology used for the PPS. In our CPI publication, we publish 5 different CPIs depending on the income of the different levels of the population. And our highest income group is for people earning roughly 150,000 Rand per annum, and this was in 2012. So if we adjust it, let's call it 15,000 a month. My experience with PPS is that the typical member of PPS, a doctor, dentist, and the like, will be in a much higher income bracket than what is reported for our highest earning quintile. So one should be careful not to think that the price changes experienced by the very rich people should be comparable to the price changes experienced by the general population.
Okay, Joe de Beer, let me put it to you this way then and say, let's look at something that everybody consumes, because electricity has been rolled out far more dramatically since 1994 than at any other time in South African history, and electricity is considerably more expensive than it was in 2006. Fuel prices are considerably higher, the cost of transport and the cost of food. The basket of goods that absorbs most of a poor household's income is dramatically more expensive than it was in 2006. Are we not soft soaping the inflation numbers here for political ends?
Definitely not. I mean, I can guarantee you there's no political interference with any of our official statistics. I mean, that is one of the core things that we won't budge on. I can't put it any stronger. There's no political interference. If you take individual product price changes, such as electricity or fuel, I think if you compare that over time, you'll see a very close correlation between the movement in the monthly adjustments to the fuel prices and the way it is then reported in the CPI. So I've got no hesitation of doing any of those types of comparisons.
Okay, Joe de Beer in Pretoria, Jannie Rossouw here in Johannesburg. Joe de Beer says your figures lack credibility. Why do you believe that Stats SA's figures lack credibility?
I simply do not get the same results as Stats SA despite my best efforts. In my view, the solution is quite simple. Stats SA must publish every month all the actual prices at the shops where they collected them on their website at the time when they publish the inflation figures. So if they say they got the price of milk or whatever you have here,
I've got a litre, Jannie, you can't see it, low-fat Parmalat Ever Fresh. I don't know if that forms part of the inflation basket. It's long life, it probably doesn't, but it's there.
But if they use this, they must publish the price at the ShopRite in Kimberley. In this street, the price was R7.29. Then the public can go and back check for themselves whether they get the same prices as used by Stats SA, and that will restore credibility in the inflation figures. But until such time as Stats SA is prepared to publish the actual prices at the actual stores that they've used, they will not restore credibility.
Are you suggesting that Stats SA manipulates the data?
I think their weighting might be wrong, or the shops might send, remember they do not collect all the data themselves, they get the data sent to them. So they do not have the capacity in all instances to collect the data personally, so incorrect data might be provided to them.
Joe de Beer, your response to that?
Firstly, we do actually collect the data ourselves, so the prof is mistaken there. At the moment, we are collecting just under 400 price items each month, and that gives us about 70,000 price observations. So we believe that is a sufficiently large sample so that when we average it out by town or province, we will get an accurate reflection of the price changes. It's a difficult request to publish the 70,000 prices monthly on the website and identify which is the store that we actually went into to do the price collection. Remember, many of these shops are quite skeptical about a government department coming in, writing down prices. What are we there for? Why do we want to record the prices? So we need to keep in mind that we preserve the confidentiality of the respondent in that matter. So if we walk into a ShopRite, as the Prof mentioned, in Kimberley, and we price coffees and milks and things like that, we do it with the undertaking to the shop manager that we will not identify his store as being the one in which we quoted or obtained the prices for those 20 or 30 different items.
So, Joe, does it bother you at all that people like Jannie Rossouw, who's the head of the School of Economics at Wits University, says that your numbers lack credibility? Is it of concern to you?
Well, of course, we would prefer if everybody just uses our numbers with no thought about whether it's correct or not. So as long as there are sophisticated users that have some concern, the ball is in our court to make sure that we try to demonstrate to them that the numbers are credible. There's something else I picked up in the report. A quote from the report says that some of the PPS respondents, such as doctors and dentists, often import expensive medical equipment. And with the throughput of the rand, they find that those price increases are obviously much higher than the 4.5% that's reflected in the CPI. But I think the important thing of that quote is it demonstrates that the respondents might be refusing or confusing the CPI with the producer price index. Because if a medical practitioner buys equipment for its business, it shouldn't form part of his CPI for the household, because that's not a typical consumer item for the household.
Okay, but the knock-on effect there is that every time I open my mouth in a dentist's surgery, he's going to charge me more for drilling in it, which is the consequence there. We need to wrap up here.
Can I just ask Joe to meet us halfway? Just publish the prices without the stores. Meet us halfway.
Okay, can you publish the prices without the stores? At least the data is there.
Is the Prof asking for a publication with 70,000 price observations every month?
That's what he is asking for.
We would love it. We would love it. We would do beautiful research, please.
I feel like I don't know. I feel like the General Secretary of the United Nations trying to broker a peace treaty here. But Jannie Rossouw, the bottom line is you don't believe the numbers because of your personal experience. Joe de Beer says the numbers are accurate based on a national sample. You don't believe that the national sample is accurate. You don't believe that the sums are being done properly. You want greater clarity
and transparency.
Joe de Beer, can you give any sort of guarantee of greater transparency?
You know, in the early and mid-90s, Stats SA had a statistical release where it published the average prices of the items in the basket, because that had secondary use for people, for example, wanting to find out what is the minimum cost of living if you had to buy so many loaves of bread and milk and the like. And that is something that we can explore to see if there's a useful reintroducing a publication of that kind.
Jody Bebb, thank you very much, joining us from Stats SA in Pretoria this evening. Also working overtime at 9 o'clock at night. Very impressive for a civil servant. And then Jannie Rossouw, the head of the Wits School of Economic and Business Sciences, who doesn't believe for a moment the Stats SA numbers, wants greater transparency. I bet you don't believe the numbers either. But then you've got a DSTV subscription, you're watching CNBC Africa. You're not living in a poor area in a disadvantaged part of the country. That's also the reality. We all have different inflation numbers, whether it be 4.6%, 8.3%, or even in double digits, depending on the sort of car you drive, the medical aid you subscribe to, and the personal security service you have to protect the stuff in your safe at home. All of that, of course, does add up. There'll be more money makers and money decision makers and people who interrogate the numbers tomorrow on the Money Makers. That's it from us tonight. Thank you for watching. Good night.